My name's Pieta Manning. I'm from Hireup, and I'm the community organiser for Southern New South Wales and ACT. And Hireup is a provider of supports in the NDIS. We're registered in the ACT in New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria, waiting for other registrations to come through. And as well as being a provider of supports, Hireup also sees itself as a community partner. And we understand that often before people can even make a decision about whether or not they want to use us or another provider, there's actually a big gap in what they understand about the NDIS. And this is something that I've found to be true. It's fantastic. As Claire said, we're working in an individualised model now where people have more control and more access to how they use their funding than we ever have before. But it's a bit like saying to somebody, here you go, here's some money, you can go and spend it. But the big question always is, what can I spend it on? What am I allowed to do? Who can I employ? Who can I use to help me achieve my goals? And I think this is one of the big gaps that we've seen, and something that I'm really passionate about helping people understand is what they can actually do. We have this amazing possibility in our hands and this amazing opportunity. How do we make the most of it? So for me, I always go back to the price guide, and I usually say to people, this is not about looking at prices. This is not always about looking at the lists of prices. When we actually look at the price guide, there's a lot of information in there that we can use as participants. So I'm a nominee, my daughter has a disability, so I'm her nominee. So as participants and parents and nominees and family members, there's actually a lot of information in the price guide that we can use for ourselves. So one of the first things the NDIS price guide tells us is that the NDIS provides funding to participants to purchase a range of reasonable and necessary supports aimed at increasing their independence, inclusion and social and economic participation. That's it's literally in the first one of the first paragraphs. It's a really powerful statement. But what I find really disappointing is that instead of this being a statement that encourages us to think about all the amazing things we can do, people often see that phrase reasonable and necessary as almost like a stick they get beat around the head with. Because this is what we hear all the time. Oh, is it reasonable and necessary? I don't think that's reasonable and necessary. But what is the reasonable and necessary framework? So what I want to take you through, first of all, is what they consider reasonable and necessary, and what the NDIS will and won't pay for. So the first thing we need to get straight is straight away, the NDIS will not pay for a support that's not related to a person's disability. Very specifically now, we're seeing that they don't want to pay for support that they believe duplicates the supports that should already be funded by a different mechanism. So this is around this pushback with education and with health that we're seeing very strongly, with housing and transport. So we must have an expectation in our community that the NDIS is just one of the supports in our community, and a person with disability should always have additional support from the rest of the community systems. It also won't fund a support that relates to day-to-day expenses, and they're not related to their support needs. So that's things like food or electricity or rent. And also a support that's likely to cause harm to the participant. When we look at the reasonable and necessary framework, though, we come to what is really pretty much just a common sense set of principles. And this is what I'm saying. It's important for us to understand this. So this is actually from the legislation, and this is the exact wording. So the first point of reasonable and necessary, it's that the support will assist the participant to pursue the goals, objectives and aspirations included in the participant's statements of goals and aspirations. So this is the first thing, and one of the most important things to understand, is that the NDIS expects any money you spend, any supports you put in place, to always relate back to the goals. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how important your goals are shortly. That the support will assist the participant to undertake activities to facilitate the participant's social and economic participation. Social and economic participation. That's what it's all about, guys. This is about getting people into community. Now, what that looks for every individual, of course, is completely different. And or economic participation for one person may be getting pre-employment skills. It may be having support to get a job. But for someone else, it might be the ability to go to a local shop and spend money. It might be about making the choice of where they want to live and paying rent on a house that they actually want to live in. The support represents value for money in that the costs of the support are reasonable and relative both to the benefits achieved and the cost of an alternative support. So it must be value for money, and we hear this a lot. This section of the reasonable and necessary probably most specifically speaks to people that are self-managing. So if you haven't, we're going to talk about the different ways that plans are managed as well. If you have an agency-managed plan, we know that the price guide sets the maximum amount of money that you can pay for a support. If you're self-managing though, you do have that option of choosing to pay for more expensive support. So this could be that you want to access a therapist, a psychologist, or a specialist OT or a specialist speech therapist who actually charges more per hour than what the price guide states. And this is where the NDIS is saying this is actually okay, as long as the benefits that you are getting are equal to the amount that you are paying. So this is about you starting to make very responsible decisions, and it's really educating yourself about the type of supports you want. It could be that a support worker that you want to employ or a support organisation you want to employ charges more per hour than $45.70, but you know that those people in that organisation have a specialist set of skills that you want to access. So it is okay, but keeping in mind common sense, that you want to make sure that the amount that you're paying actually equals the benefit that you're getting. So that's 3. Number 4, the support will be or is likely to be effective and beneficial for the participant having regard to current good practice. This is one that we need to keep in mind, especially when you're looking at therapies. So this is where the NDIS says, look, you know, Reiki might be an amazing approach that you use for yourself, but at the moment there isn't enough evidence to show us that it is a modality that would work for the majority of people. So therefore the NDIS won't fund Reiki. But the NDIS every year are looking at this evidence. So, I mean, when we started in the scheme, music therapy and art therapy were not recognised, whereas now they are. So every year we know that when the price guide comes out and when the new assessments come out, that sometimes there will be new additions to this list. And particularly in terms of the AAT decisions, that's where we see the changes, where people are challenging this, what the NDIS accepts as current good practice. People are going in with considerable amounts of evidence showing that this particular form of therapy or this particular type of support has been very beneficial for them. And that's why the AAT's decisions are so important for us, because they help to keep change happening in the NDIS and also help to make sure that we're actually acknowledging when things are working and what's actually helping people. And the last one is that funding or provision of support takes into account what is reasonable to expect families, carers, informal networks and community to provide. This is a very important one. And it works both ways. So if we have an 8-year-old child who still needs some help to brush their teeth, it would be reasonable for us as a community to expect their parents to do that. But if you're talking about a 40-year-old man who still needs assistance to brush his teeth, or a 20-year-old man who still needs assistance to brush his teeth, as a community, we wouldn't expect his parents to do that. When you apply this principle, you need to understand the NDIS is saying we're not there to do everything. We're there to take into account what the community expects as being reasonable for you to be funded for. So this is our little thing. I'll actually email all these slides out to everybody, so with Claire. And this is a really good little thing to keep into mind. What I find really interesting is, and I find heartbreaking, is often people will get their funding and they'll have a great idea. Oh, I'd love to be able to go to the handmade markets. but I know that to go I need support because I get really tired and I can't spend the whole day there. I'd love to go and spend the whole day. I'd love to go and do some shopping. Maybe even I make some jewellery and I'd love to go and sell some jewellery. I'd love someone to support me. The thing that breaks my heart is when I hear people have a great idea, but then they're so uncertain about whether or not they can actually use that support, they end up not doing it. Or they spend 3 hours on the NDIS line waiting for someone to validate their idea, to be told, not sure. So what the really great thing about understanding this is this gives you the confidence and tools to start making those decisions about how to use your funding yourself. You are the person that knows in your own personal circumstance or in the circumstance of your person what supports you need, and then applying the reasonable and necessary framework. So has anyone got a support that they thought they liked to put in place and they weren't sure about? And what we'll do is actually apply reasonable and necessary. Okay, and we hear this a lot. So Jan's saying that somebody has rung and said, the physio isn't exactly mentioned in my plan and therefore I've been told I can't use funding for it. One of the things I would say to you is that once you get your funding, the drive of the NDIS is for you to show outcomes against your goals. Whether or not a specific support is mentioned in your plan does not matter. At the end of it's about what is your goal and what supports have you put in place to get the outcomes. So if your goal is to improve your physical and health and well-being, then a physio is a no-brainer, isn't it? And I think this is part of understanding. This is the personal, what we see so much, where that person may have been told by a local area coordinator, and with all respect to them, they are working on the knowledge that they're given. But honestly, I think it's about us going back to understanding what the legislation says and what the price guide says. And certainly we'll have a look at the funded areas, and the funded areas say that it's flexible within that area. I'll talk a bit more like that. So I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example then. Let's use the example of, say, a 22-year-old woman who makes jewellery and loves to go to the handmade markets. So we had a situation where I was talking to someone and this young person was told that no, that's actually a hobby, so you shouldn't have support to have someone go and help you sell your jewellery at the handmade markets. So let's apply. Do you want to apply reasonable and necessary? And this is what I'm saying. This is a great tool to use. So we want to have a look at, we have the support is to have support to go and sell jewellery at a market. So do we think that, is it going to address that person's goals? Is it actually going to facilitate social and economic participation? Well, absolutely it is. It absolutely is. Would it be reasonable to expect her networks to do that? Well, at a 21, I wouldn't expect any 21 or 22-year-old to be hanging off their parents waiting for them to go and take part in a market. Is it effective and beneficial for the participant? Absolutely. Think of all the networks she's going to make. Think of all the new people that she's going to meet when she goes to those markets. Is it most appropriately funded by the NDIS? So the reason why this young woman needs this support is a directly result of her disability. So absolutely it is. Does it help her pursue her goals? One of her goals will absolutely be about being more involved in her community. And is it value for money? Well, absolutely, because the mental health benefits for that person of going out on a Sunday, probably to a market, the economic and social participation opportunities it opens up for them is fantastic. And in the long term, the opportunities it opens up absolutely will provide value for money. That's a really simple example, but when I send out the slides, I'll send you a little explanation of each of the pieces. But it's a really good way, as I said, for you yourselves, as you're looking at how you want to expend this funding, when you're looking at how you actually want to make the most of this money, how you make those decisions, not waiting for somebody else. Because ultimately that's what the price guide is saying. This money is being given to you, each individual, to make decisions about how to use that money the best for themselves. So the next one, it says, again, this is from the price guide, it says that participant budgets are designed to be flexible. This is what we're going to talk about, and allow service innovation. Importantly, supports are delivered, chosen and paid for by the individual participants who have choice and control about how their budgets are spent. So this is the NDIS price guide saying this, and this is what I say. I feel really sad when people feel like the price guide is actually something that's stopping them from being innovative. It's saying we want people to be doing great things with their money. We want them to be doing interesting things with their services. So underneath the NDIS funding, we know that it's split into 3 areas, and it's really important to understand how to use these areas. And I know that many of you have had your plans for a while, but it's always worth just going back and understanding. So core funding, absolutely, is split into a couple of different areas. And the biggest thing to remember with core funding is that it's flexible across all of those areas. And this is something that often is not communicated very well, that it is absolutely flexible across all the areas that are covered under core. So that includes daily living support. Usually that's things like in-home support, someone to come and help you maintain your house, do some gardening. In Canberra, we're really lucky. We've got a lot of gardeners that are registered providers now. We have a laundromat that's a registered provider. And I think one of the best things to understand about when you're using your funding flexibly is you may not need someone to do your laundry all year. But if you're a family that has a child with incontinence or continence needs and it's the middle of winter in Canberra and you don't have a dryer, a laundry service for a couple of months might be awesome. So it's about also thinking about within these supports, using them flexibly that suits you. Social and community supports are about getting out and about. Consumables is absolutely things like it could be continence products, it could also be nutritional products if somebody is peg-fed, but also when people are self-managed, we normally find it, they can be given what they call a low-risk assistive tech budget, which is $1,021, and that is usually 2 purchases under $500 each. It's $1,021. Don't ask me why. It's one of those, it's just like the NDIS just can't do anything straightforward or simple. It has to just have that little bit that makes you go, Now, the other thing that's included in core is transport. Now, we know that people also will get some additional money. Some people will be given money that is like a transport allowance. It's the old mobility allowance. It comes directly into their bank accounts. And once it hits your bank account, it's up to you how you use it. So you could use it for taxis. You could use it to buy a MyWay card. You could use it for what you need to get around. What's important to understand, though, that transport still sits within core. And this means absolutely that if you are working with somebody, if someone's providing you support and they're taking you somewhere, you are probably going to be charged 76 cents a kilometre. You can take that transport money out of core. I remember David Bowen being questioned about this, and he was like, what's the point of people having social and community money if they then can't go anywhere because they can't pay for that transport with a support worker? So absolutely, the NDIS isn't going to give you any more money, but when you're doing your budgeting, if you know that you can use some money for transport, you can absolutely take it out of core. So it's flexible. What I say to people, this is a bit like having a Myer card. So you can walk into Myer and you can go downstairs and buy chocolates, or you can go upstairs and buy a pair of shoes, or you can go and buy a record. It's up to you where you spend it. The next one is capital, and capital is stuff. Capital is your home mods, is your car mods, it's your mobility aids, it's your communication aids. It's things that are actually physical things. And generally to get this funding, you'll have put in your reports from your therapists. Then that funding will arrive in with your funding in your plan, and you spend it on exactly what you've said you're going to. So this is a stated support. And I say to people, this is a bit like having a pre-approved loan from the bank. So you know what you want to go to buy, you go to the bank, you tell them, they give you the money for it, and you go and buy it. The next one is the capacity building supports. And we know that there's a range of areas under this: coordination, improved living arrangements, which is support for someone to maintain tenancy, increased social and community participation, which a lot of people say you've got community participation in core, and then you've got increased social and community participation here. This area here, it's about people building on skills. So it's actually about somebody who's learning new things. Finding and keeping a job, improve relationships, improved health and wellbeing, improved learning, improved life choices, and improved daily living skills. So the interesting thing, though, is within each of these areas, there are a whole lot of supports. There are a whole lot of different things that you can access. The one that always interests me is the improved daily living skills, or what we call capacity building, CB daily living, which people will be told that's for your OT and your speech therapist and your physio. But if you actually go and have a look in the price guide, and this is where it is actually worth going and having a look, it also includes counselling. And that can also include family counselling for the impact on the family of the person with the disability. It also includes life stage transitioning, mentoring, parent and carer training, driving lessons. There's a lot of different areas in these subcategories, which it is worth going and having a look. And remembering that these are delegated supports. So you can't go and buy, if you have money to go and do some social and community, you can't go and buy therapy support with that money, but you have a lot of flexibility within that area. So I say to people, this is like trotting off. You've had your birthday and Christmas all at once. It's like trotting off to the Westfield shopping centre with a whole lot of gift cards. So you can go into Goldmark and you might buy a new watch or a pair of earrings, but you can't take your Goldmark card down to the bookshop and buy a book. So you have choice within these areas, but you must keep the money within these areas. It is worth exploring more, but definitely for me it's about understanding that the money is there to be spent in those areas that relate to you. You won't necessarily get funding in all of these areas, but when you get that funding in that area, it is about you spending the money in the way that's going to benefit you the best. I say to people at the moment, look, I think we need to be really honest about this. The way we enter the scheme and the way we're treated at entry and review is not an individualised model. It is not. With 420,000 people coming into the scheme, it is not an individualised model. But once you get your funding, that is where it is completely individualised. But we just need to have the confidence to start making decisions that are actually relevant to us and not relying on other people to still tell us what we can do. Back to the price guide. Each participant with funding under the NDIS is given a budget that aligns with their individual plan and supports them in achieving their goals. Your goals are really important. I know when we started the scheme, and I mean, I'm looking around, I can see people that have been in the scheme for the last 3 years. We used to do these beautiful long goals, and we used to think about, we used to go in with and have these discussions. And then we sort of went through a phase and they sort of went, oh, don't worry about the goals, just put something in. But your goals are really important, and you'll see why. Because remember, if we go back to the reasonable and necessary framework, the first thing the NDIS says is that all your goals, all your funding must be spent against the goals, must relate to something in your goals. So it's really important to make sure that your goals capture the things that you want to achieve in the next 12 months. Your goals can also help you decide where you want to start. I think for yourselves it's really important to have those goals, because when you understand what your goals are, then you can then start to look at what are the type of supports you're going to put in place, and then from there, what are the strategies that you need. So they are a really important place for you to start when you're looking at expending your funding. I say to people to think of your goal as a big umbrella. And the bigger the umbrella, the more supports you can pop underneath. And when you think about your goals, they should be about doing things, not having things done to you or receiving services. They're about what you're going to be doing. They're about participation goals. So if we look at this, this is a really sort of typical request that people would say, what's your goal? My goal is to get someone to help me clean my house. And I've seen some really poorly written goals in my time, as I assume other people have, and this is what would have been. But the problem is, that's not a goal. That's not going to improve somebody's life. How is that helping somebody to really become a better person in our community? Sometimes, though, if we scratch the surface and we say, why is that important? Now, that's important for that person because they want to maintain their independence, because they want to protect their tenancy, because if their house is not kept clean, they're at risk of being taken out of that housing. And they also want to feel good about themselves. And maybe if they feel good and their house is clean, they might want to invite their friends and their family over for dinner. So as a participation goal, it becomes, I want to have support to maintain my independence living. And also, if you look at that in an umbrella analogy, if you think about how skinny that umbrella is, if it's just to have somebody clean their house, great, tick, give that person $10,000 worth of funding for some domestic assistance. Great, we've achieved that goal. But it's such a skinny, narrow goal. If we talk about increasing independence and staying at home, suddenly it might be an OT to come and check that their house is safe and suitable for them. It might be somebody to come and help them do some cleaning, but also to respectfully help them deal with a little bit of stuff that they've hoarded over there. It could be someone to come and help them starting to learn to cook again, or maybe to go out and do some cooking so that then they can entertain their family at home. So your goals are really, really important. 5 minutes. The NDIS price guide is not a comprehensive list of all available supports, nor does it prescribe the only supports funded by the NDIS. Claims and payments using a best fit approach and to assist claims and payments should be made using a best fit approach to assist participants with engaging and negotiating with service providers. Providers should claim payments against a support line item that most closely aligns with the service they have delivered. So this is something we hear often, that people go in and they say, I want someone to come, I have a therapy dog, sometimes I can't walk it every week, I want someone to come and walk my therapy dog twice a week. And a provider will sometimes say, oh no, we don't have a line item for that. The price guide is saying, come on guys, be a bit sensible about this. The price guide says, use a best fit approach. Use the thing that is most closely aligned. So this is what I'm trying to say. There are not barriers to service provision, but as consumers, I think it's important that we are confident to go to the providers and say, actually no. The price guide actually says that you don't have to have an exact fit. You can be flexible. This is the service I want. It's up to you to figure out how you're going to claim it. And the price guide encourages you to be flexible about that. I'll just quickly flip through these. So these are the models of how your plans are managed. And again, we'll send these all through and there's a bit of an explanation. Agency managed, we understand that people need to deal with registered providers. But I have to say we're really lucky in Canberra. There's a huge number of registered providers. And I would suggest that if you're active in your portal, go in and check the provider guide, the provider finder tab, because it actually is reasonably accurate and it'll give you an idea of some of the newer providers that are coming through. With a plan manager, you have more flexibility about using providers in the community, and then the plan manager claims for you. As I said, with the resources I'll send you a proper explanation of it all, because I'm being given the hurry on here. And then with self-management, we know is the most flexible model, but it also is the model that requires the most work and also isn't good for someone that's at financial risk. So when I claim my 3 sessions, the 3 sessions of speech therapy my daughter's had, it's my responsibility that it goes from her account to the speech therapist and it doesn't get lost along the way. There's no requirement for providers to charge the maximum price given for support. Participants and providers should negotiate prices like other suppliers and consumers based on the needs and preferences of the participants and the specific supports required. This allows the participant flexibility and control over their budgets for support. This is the price guide saying this. Now, we aren't in a mature enough market yet, I don't think. I mean, we're all still finding our way. The providers and us as participants and consumers. But I think it's important for us to keep in mind that that's who we are. We are consumers. So the NDIS encourages this consumer-directed model. They want people to be purchasing supports, and therefore we need to have the same expectations of a level of service, of being treated as a valued client, someone that they want to keep engaging with and that they will maintain a relationship with. And we also are absolutely entitled to have expectations about the type of services and the quality of services that we receive. So absolutely, no matter how your plan is managed, and I don't care if it's agency, plan or self-managed, every service agreement and schedule of support that you sign should clearly outline the services and the cost for the services that you will be paying and the responsibilities of both parties. That should always be, never sign a schedule of support. And even just very recently, I was sent a schedule of support from a very large organisation here in Canberra for services that had no mention of cost on it, and I don't think they knew who I was, but they got some very direct feedback, Claire. All providers should provide you with a monthly statement. Again, it doesn't matter if you're agency, plan or self-managed. Providers should actually provide you with a statement about what services they're providing and what they've charged you for. You should absolutely know that. And you are now a consumer, so you are covered by Australian consumer law. Now, I was just saying, in New South Wales, Fair Trading in New South Wales have set up a special division to deal with complaints about NDIS providers. And here in Canberra, go into human services. But absolutely, you are a consumer, and if the services have not lived up to what you want, then you have a right to complain. The Quality and Safeguarding Commission that we were talking about earlier absolutely is coming in July next year, and this will fill the gap. We've had no regulatory body over providers. I mean, so when you had a serious issue with a provider and you went back to the provider and you tried to resolve it and you had no joy, you rang the NDIS or you went to Braddon and you complained and they went, not our problem. This is where the Quality and Safeguarding Commission comes in. So it will oversee the providers, registered and not registered. It will actually work with participants and nominees and support workers. It will inform its developing that NDIS code of conduct, and it will also enforce that practice and code of conduct as well. So it will now take over all the regulation and registration requirements for providers under the NDIS, and we'll be moving towards a national registration. So you'll know that any business that's registered with the NDIS has undergone a national registration process. They're also moving towards a national registration process for support workers. Again, so you will know that whoever is holding that registration card has undergone a national registration process. They'll oversee the restrictive practices and behaviour management process, and that's a really important part of our sector that hasn't been given a lot of stewardship lately. They'll also can collaborate with the states and look at how those registrations are going. They will not handle complaints around the NDIA or the local area coordinators. As Fiona said, they will have to go back to the Ombudsman. But this starting in July next year, I know, which is a bit frustrating for us in the ACT, but I think we'll see is going to fill that gap. And in terms of being able to provide feedback and push development of services and improvement in services in our sector, this will actually play a major part. Just quickly, so going back, it's the last slide. What's really important for me, I think that I want people to be confident, is think about the supports you want to help you achieve your goals. So think about what works for you. Understand the supports satisfy that reasonable and necessary. So be confident that you're not acting outside the box. You're not, doing anything that's wrong. You've thought about this stuff. Think about who you'd like to support you and what providers you can access, and that will depend sometimes on the financial management of your plan. Communicate your support needs with confidence. So understand that you want this support and you have a right to ask for it from that provider. And then monitor your supports, communicate with support providers, and just develop that sort of respectful and successful professional relationship that we do with lots of other businesses in areas of our lives. We have a respectful relationship with our hairdressers, with our doctors, with our gardeners. This is no different. We need to be confident about developing these relationships. But for me to do that, we first of all need to be confident to actually go out there and ask for the things that we need. Thank you.